All right. Well, I'd like to thank Bike Durham for hosting this event. And we're here with Mark, our cameraman, and Brandon, who will be manning the computer and answering any questions that you have and mediating some chat later on. We're just going to jump right into this. So first of all of Durham's bike shops are here if you really need us. But at this time, if there's stuff you can do on your own, you might as well do it. Remember, your bike doesn't have to function perfectly to be safe and fun. You know, our goal right now is to cover all the basics just to get out and have some fun safely on your bike. And during the chat section a little bit later on, if we have more detailed questions, we'll get into that. So typically when you look at the basics to get rolling, what you want is what we call an ABC check. Typically that stands for air, brakes, chain, crank, quick releases, and a final check over. We're going to amend that a little bit, but that's the basics of what we're going to do. And you'll pardon me, I've done a lot of these seminars, but this is my first in this format, so I'm not sure where to look. I've got different cameras in different places, or different monitors in different places, and I'll be checking my notes occasionally, but let's just get started. All right, so first thing, air. Not everybody knows your tubes are porous, your tires are porous. You will lose air if you just let your bike sit around for a while. Even over a week, you'll lose 20% or more of your air. If you haven't ridden your bike in 6 months, don't be surprised if you go to your bike and find the tires are completely flat. You don't necessarily have a puncture in your tube. I'd be able to get a second coat of paint on my boat if I change every flat tire where someone says, I have a flat tire, I haven't ridden my bike in 6 months. Most of the time, you just need air. Now, if you roll your bike while it has these really low tires, you may puncture the tube. So the important thing is to bring the pump to the bike or the bike to the pump and then pump up. Now, if you're really into maximizing performance, tire pressure can get kind of complicated. But for us, we're going to keep it really simple because we just want to go out and ride and have fun. You want to aim for the middle of the pressure range indicated on the side of the tire. So your tire, somewhere along the sidewall, should have a pressure range listed. So here we've got 85 to 115 PSI. And we're just going to shoot for the middle of that range and use common sense. If you're a bigger rider, maybe go a little bit more. If you're a lighter rider, go a little bit less. But those minimum and maximum numbers, those are really just for safety. Above that maximum or below the minimum, the tire is more likely to roll off the rim. But it really doesn't have anything to do with the performance of the bike. So aim for the middle of the range and you'll be good to go. Another thing that you might want to look out for if you haven't filled up your tires in a really long time, and especially if you've been riding with low tires, is a bent valve stem. So we're going to go over to another bike here. This one isn't that bad, but sometimes you'll see your valve is coming out at an angle like this. And if you were just to inflate it, the rim itself would cut the valve open. So what you want to do is make sure the tire is entirely deflated. And don't just take the valve and push it to where you want to be. Try to slide it with the tire into the right position and get it straight. And then you could pull it straight like that and inflate it. Quite often, people come in, they think they have flat tires, and they didn't have a flat tire until they tried to inflate it. And that's when they actually punctured the tire. So once you get it straight, you could fill it up. You don't need a fancy compressor like this. Any hand pump will do. Now, if you can't get that valve straight, which is sometimes the case, just fill it up to the absolute minimum pressure and bring it to the bike shop and they can fix it for you. But that's only if you really have to. All right, so that's air. It's about the most basic. If anyone's got questions about that, maybe type them in and Brandon will relay them to me. All right, so the next thing is brakes. That's the B of the ABC quick check. I'd say brakes and bolts. So brakes, there's a lot of different types of brakes out there. I've got 3 here to show you, but there's some overlapping principles for all of them. Now,
we have one question about air.
Sure. We're going to stop and answer a question about air. Hold on a second.
So we have one question about air from Mira. Does the bike frame mass, so carbon fiber, road, racing versus aluminum hybrid or mountain, factor into whether you go higher or lower in the PSI range?
So generally speaking, and this is where it could get really complex, the skinnier the tire, the more air you need to prevent the tire from deforming. So skinny tires will go towards the higher end of the pressure range. Fatter tires will go towards the lower end of the pressure range. But there are a lot of factors, including the terrain, the size of the rider, and maybe if we have time at the end of the seminar, we'll go into a little of that. It's super fun stuff to discuss, all the factors that go into rolling resistance. It could be really fascinating. But generally speaking, the skinnier of a tire, the higher pressure it needs to prevent from deforming. All right, so let's continue on with brakes. So brake pads, that's the first thing you want to examine. We usually suggest that you replace them when they're about halfway worn. But if you don't know what your brake pads look like when they were brand new, you're in some trouble. So brake pads, they could be fairly thick and made out of soft rubber, or they could be very thin and made out of hard rubber. You don't know what they look like originally. So that could pose a problem if you're trying to see how worn they are. One thing that you might want to do is just look at your rear brake pads. Rear brake pads, people tend to use their rear brakes more than their front brakes. So if your rear brakes look to be about half the thickness of your front brakes or more, it's probably time to replace your rear brake pads and your front brake pads shortly thereafter. Now, this is just an ABC quick check to see if it's safe for you to go for a ride today, maybe the next day. Slightly warm pads, even halfway warm pads, they'll get you through a day or two. Don't worry about it. Go out and have fun on your bike. But you just want to make sure that you're not getting down towards the metal. If you look, we've got a close up here. You see there's a metal carrier that holds this pad. And most pads have some sort of metal backing. You want to make sure that there's no chance of that hitting as the pad wears down. So as long as you have a couple of millimeters, you should be fine for a ride or two. But typically, half of pad wear is where you're looking to replace them. All right. So let's move on to the different types of brakes and how to adjust them. The second part, we've checked brake pad wear. Next thing we want to do is check brake alignment. So I'm going to misalign this brake. Can we see here, is one side hitting the rim and the other not? Is it, Mark?
I think it's kind of, you can see it?
Okay, well, I'm sure our viewers have vivid imagination, so you could imagine one pad will be hitting one side of the rim before the other pad is. You see here the wheel's not going to spin because one pad's rubbing. Now, this is fairly easy to adjust, but it's different on different types of brakes, and there's lots of different brakes out there. So I'm just going to cover the real basics. Can you grab me a small Phillips screwdriver, Brandon? Thank you, sir. All right, so this is a typical brake for a road bike. It's called a typical caliper brake. These are super easy to adjust. If it's properly installed, it should move by hand. The brake should not require any tools. You can move it by hand and adjust the pads so the rim is centered in between. Got a good view of that, Mark? So you see I'm actually just moving this back and forth. We're going to center that rim in between. If the brake moves very, very easily, you may want to tighten up the bolt and back. I'm going to presume, however, that for purposes of this video, you have very few tools on you, or maybe only a screwdriver and a basic set of Allen keys. But I think that's the basics for this one. You're just going to slide it into position, get the rim centered in between the pads. Don't worry if one pad hits slightly before the other pad. It doesn't have to be perfect to work sufficiently well. All right, you can just pick it up. Yeah. All right. And we are getting a phone call. For reference, we are closed typically on Mondays. So we're going to move on to a V brake, which is probably the most common brake style. So if you want to move over towards that bike, Mark. Is the other phone? Okay. So V brakes, they work wonderfully. It's a very simple smart design. So you have these two big arms, and we've got this spring that pulls the arms away from each other, and then a cable that pulls the arms towards each other. So let's say we've got, I'm going to manipulate this a little bit. Give me 1 second. I'm going to make this brake not work properly. So you see here, the right side brake pad is rubbing. We want to move this pad away from the rim. The way to do that would be to make this spring pull more, to make it a little tighter. And you'll see on most brakes, there's going to be a screw somewhere towards the base of the brake caliper itself. And you're going to want to tighten that up. So tightening it is going to increase tension on the spring, and that's going to pull the pad away from the rim. And that's it. We're all set. And Brandon, just relay, let me know if we've got any questions about that. Okay. The next type of brake, and this is one's going to be the hardest to work on, unfortunately, is a disc brake. Now, there are two types of disc brakes, hydraulic and cable actuated. And we could do it down here. So what I'm saying now is only going to apply to cable actuated brakes. Well, actually, part of this will apply to hydraulic brakes. But for cable actuated brakes, you're going to squeeze them with one hand. You'll see two bolts on the top of the caliper. I'm going to loosen those, squeeze, and very slowly and sequentially tighten a little bit. And then go to the other bolt, tighten a little bit, and go back and forth, tightening just a little at a time. If you tighten one bolt a lot, it's going to throw the caliper off alignment and recreate the original problem. Okay. Now, there's very little clearance with disc brake calipers. Sometimes you do have to manipulate this by hand. A little bit of rubbing won't cause any damage. It won't wear down your pads significantly. If you just hear a little as you're riding, it's not going to do any damage. You don't need to obsess about getting it perfect. When the time comes, you can bring it to the bike shop and we'll fix that. But it can be generally adjusted the way I showed you. Now, the next thing to do is see how well your brakes actually stop. Now we know they're aligned, but do they actually stop? The old rule of thumb as to whether your brakes were properly adjusted was literally a rule of thumb. So if you could squeeze the brakes and get your thumb between the brake lever and handlebar, your brake was properly adjusted. But with modern brakes, they're so incredibly powerful, the brake lever can have a lot more throw and still stop well. As a matter of fact, with some hydraulic brakes and nicer quality brakes, they engineer in that extra movement. So the brakes are give you more modulation. They're not on or off. They're a little bit safer. You can control your stopping a little bit better. So generally what you want to do is as you squeeze your brake, just make sure the brake lever never touches the handlebar and that it actually stops the wheel from spinning when under pressure. Okay, so let's say your brakes actually are not stopping you. You can either get the caliper all the way down, the lever all the way down to the handlebar, or you squeeze the lever and the wheel itself continues to move. Most brakes, except hydraulic brakes, and I'm going to want to make this distinction because we've seen people treat hydraulic brakes like cable brakes and cause some damage. So all cable brakes, I should distinguish the two now, will literally have a cable clamped near the caliper itself. Hydraulic brakes will have a hose. If you don't see a silver cable protruding from the end of your brake, you probably have a hydraulic brake, and that's a closed system like in your car. It's a little harder to work on. That's something you may want to bring to the bike shop or do a little bit more research on before you go to work on it. So for cable actuated brakes, little bell for accentuation there, there will be an adjuster barrel somewhere along the line of the cable. For some brakes, it's going to be right up near the brake lever itself. For some brakes, it can be in the middle on the housing or down at the caliper. Doesn't matter which adjuster barrel you use, as long as you turn it counterclockwise, you are going to tighten up that cable and make your brake tighter. Any chance you make your brake too tight, you could go the other way, loosen it back up. Now, one thing you want to be careful of, if your brakes were very, very, very poorly adjusted or your pads were really worn, if you just keep on turning this barrel, it will eventually pop out of its housing like that, and now you won't have a brake working at all. So this is made for minor adjustments. So let me show you when it pops out. So that's if your brake was really poorly adjusted and you were trying to adjust it beyond the capacity of the adjuster barrel. You're going to run into trouble there. So the adjuster barrel is for minor adjustments. A turn here or there should get you going. If it doesn't, then you might need a little bit more work on your bike. So, and I am illustrating here why you don't want to pull this all the way out, because it could be difficult to get back in. All right, so I'm just going to leave that there right now. Okay, so the last thing, so those were 3 types of brakes. We're not going to cover hydraulic brakes here because that could be a whole seminar on its own. The last thing in the B is bolts, or nuts and bolts. You want to just do a general safety check. I'm going to presume you don't have a full set of tools to tighten and check every nut and bolt on the bike, but you want to check all the basics. Take the wheel, put it between your handlebars, twist. Oh, it's a little loose. So we're going to tighten that one up. Take your brake levers, lift up your wheel, hit it, lift up your wheel, hit it, take your cranks, shake them back and forth. Saddles. Saddles fall off bikes more frequently than you would imagine. That can make for a very, very difficult ride home. All right, so that's your basic safety check. We're going to do a little bit more in terms of basic safety later. But if you don't have any tools, just do these quick nut and bolt checks to make sure things are safe. If you are a bodybuilder and you really put all your weight into it, you can make anything move. If it's properly adjusted, it shouldn't be so tight that you couldn't move it with a really serious effort. The idea is that these things will move if you're in an accident. If it weren't to move, it would break something else on the bike. But under normal riding conditions, this shouldn't move at all. All right. So before we move on to C, do we have any questions? All right. So I'm going to put this over here and just put that there so we know that it's loose. All right. Okay. C is for chain and cranks. All right. So chain, generally speaking, you don't want it to be rusty. You don't want it to be gunky and sticky. For optimal shifting, you want it to be fairly clean and well lubed. For safety, a rusty or kind of icky chain might, not shift so great, but it's going to get you where you're going. Let me just show you the basics of cleaning a chain. So you don't need to get a special cleaner unless your chain is incredibly filthy. Most of your dry lubricants are suspended in an alcohol solution, which is going to act as a cleaner, or some petroleum solution, which is going to act as a cleaner. What you want to do is get dry lube. It doesn't matter the brand. Wet lube sounds wet, like it's going to have great lubricity, and that's what you want, wet lube. No, you want dry lube. Wet lube is for riding in wet conditions if you know you're heading out into the rain. If you get caught in the rain here and there, no big deal. But if you know I have to ride for an hour in the rain today, that's when you want wet lube. Most of the time you want dry lube because this will not attract dirt to your chain. Dirt is what wears your chain out. So a chain that's very heavily lubricated and attracts a lot of dirt will wear out just as fast as a chain with no lube on it at all. So dry lube. Get yourself a non-aerosol bottle. Hold it over your chain, pedal backwards, and heavily saturate your chain. Because we're using this both to clean and lube. So we're gonna get some pretty heavy saturation right now. Take a clean, doesn't have to be clean, we're cleaning a chain. Get a lint-free rag. Grab the chain and wipe off all the excess. This is the part that people miss, and this is what wears out people's drivetrains. Most of the time, you should get about 1,500 miles out of a chain, but if you leave your chain too wet or completely dry, I've seen people get 400 or 500 miles out of them. And as your chain wears, it's going to wear down your cassette as well, and the cassettes get quite pricey. So you want to do this fairly thoroughly and fairly frequently. Every 2 weeks or every time you get caught in the rain, you're going to want to do this. So you see, I am really wiping off all the excess lube. The only place I want lube is in between the links. And when I'm done, the chain should be fairly clean. Most of the dirt's been transferred onto the rag. And it should just be tacky to touch. If your chain feels wet, it's too wet. It really should just feel tacky. All right, that's it. So that's your chain. Let's move on to cranks. So we did sort of our crank check in the nut and bolt check. You're going to take your crank arms, shake them back and forth, make sure that you feel no play. If you do feel play, they're too loose and they will need to be tightened up. Unfortunately, there are lots of different crank interfaces. You may not have the tools for all of them. Let's come around here. So the bolt here, this is how you tighten up these cranks. So bolt on the side here. These are for Shimano and some FSA cranks. A lot of other cranks will just have a typical center bolt that you're used to seeing, a 15, 14 millimeter bolt. The problem is, if your cranks are loose, they've probably been loose for a while, and riding with loose cranks can damage them. So you'll tighten them up and they'll come off again. They may even come off while you're riding. So actually, if you have loose cranks, that is something I might bring to the bike shop to inspect and make sure there's been no damage. All right, so final thing, quick releases, not the final thing, penultimate thing. Quick releases. This is my favorite part because there's a lot of lore and misinformation about quick releases. So we'll start off with a rear quick release on this bike. Okay, so first let's just show you how quick release functions. It's not a wing nut. Some people will just twist it like this until it's tight. Now, it's not bad. It will generally hold your wheel on, but if something were to bang it, it will loosen it up. The way quick releases are meant to work is it's a cam mechanism. As you squeeze this lever closed, it will tighten. So actually, let me get this wheel back in here. If you want to get a close-up, you'll see how the wheel goes in here. Okay, so you see, most people say to point your quick releases back for the front and rear. Bike shops and professional mechanics, especially race mechanics, will do it a little bit differently. The most important thing, you want to make sure that your quick release isn't right up against the frame. We see this quite frequently. There's two problems with this. First of all, it's not closed all the way. The frame itself is actually preventing it from moving through its full travel. Its full travel, look how much further it had to tighten. So if you tighten it up against the frame, it's actually much looser than it should be. Further, you're gonna have a hard time getting your hands in there to open it up. So ideally, what you wanna do is have it right below the chainstay. This is for your rear wheel. This part's called the chainstay. So right below the chainstay or in between the chainstay and the seat stay. Now, when it's below the chainstay or in between the chainstay and seat stay, you see it's fully closed, it's easy to access. The reason you don't want it back here, especially from pro mechanics, is if you're riding with another rider, they ride up really close to you, their wheel can get caught between the frame and the quick release. And you might be surprised, but it's happened in my experience. So it's something you definitely want to consider. So again, let's get this exactly where we need it. I'm going to go right in between the chainstay and seat stay. It's all the way closed. And how tight to make it. This one's a little difficult because there's no torque wrench for this. I can't say turn it 3 turns and then tighten it. It's a little bit, requires a little bit more experience in that. Generally speaking, turn the quick release until it barely makes contact with the frame. So you're going to hold one side. So this would be the nut. Then you're going to turn the lever itself until it barely makes contact with the frame. Then start closing it. You should start feeling resistance about halfway through the lever stroke. Close it all the way, and you should need to use your palm. If you could close it with your fingers, it's too loose. If you start feeling resistance, maybe only a quarter way through, it's way too tight. You're not going to be able to close it. You may do some damage by forcing it closed. So you should feel resistance about halfway through on most tire levers. You should need to use your palm, and you should position it underneath the chainstay or between the chainstay and seat stay. So let's move on to the front quick release. And we are working with gloves, and this is one of the hazards of that. Okay. Front quick release works exactly the same way as the back. And again, you don't want to go directly against the fork leg because that's going to prevent you from getting underneath there and opening it back up, and it's not going to close all the way. You don't want to go forward because now this can get caught on somebody's wheel, or I've seen the loop of rear derailleur housing. I've seen this get caught on that and rip somebody's derailleur off and cause an accident. Oh, saplings, that's true. When you're riding off-road, this could, grab a sapling and launch you off your bicycle. So you want to go right behind the fork leg. Again, not all the way back, directly back like this, because something could get in there, but right behind the fork leg. All right, so I'm just going to make sure my wheel's centered and try that again. You have any questions, Brandon?
No, I would just mention making sure it's fully up in the dropouts.
Thank you. So Brandon just reminded me, you want to make sure that your wheel's fully up and adjusted in your dropouts. Let me move this here. So if I were just to tighten this quick release up,
Most people would do this in the ground.
and let's do this on the ground like most people would. So we've got our quick release open. What you want to do is as you tighten your quick release up, ideally you'll grow a third hand out of your back, and then you could hold the quick release and put one hand on the handlebars and push down. Your kids are probably home right now, so make them do something. So have them come over and push down on the handlebars of the bike. That's going to ensure that the wheel is all the way up in the dropouts, and then you could close the lever. See, I'm doing it the wrong way now, right in front of the fork. I'm going to do it behind the fork. That's suggested. All right. Okay, so that's quick releases. Remember, not all bikes have quick releases. Some have what are called through axles, which is a big long bolt. You're going to want to make sure that those are snug. And some just have regular nuts. So you're going to want to make sure those are snug. Again, if you just do your hit test to double check their security, you'll be good. The final thing is just so we got A, B, C, air, brakes, chain, crank, quick releases, and then a final check over. In a safe, controlled area, ride the bike really slowly, check to make sure everything is working. Doesn't have to be working perfectly, just safely. And that's it. Is there anything else you think we should add, Brandon, before we start taking questions?
Check over was the C.
So what time is it? Let's see how much time we have for questions. 12:35, so that's great. So we've got lots of time for questions. So I'm going to wait patiently and do absolutely nothing entertaining.
I have a question.
All right, we've got a question from Mark. What is it?
How do you feel about WD-40? They cannot hear you.
Okay, so the question is, how do I feel about WD-40? So WD-40, the WD stands for water displacer. It's not really a great lubricant. It's great at preventing things from rusting, and it works better as a lubricant than nothing at all. So that if that's all you have, use it, but be really careful to wipe off all the excess with a rag, as I demonstrated when we did the chain before, which I can't find my rag. The problem with WD-40 is it doesn't penetrate that well. So it won't get in between the links of your chain very well, and it's very sticky. So, you know, a lot of dirt particles will stick to it, which can wear things down faster. But it is better than no lubricant at all. So if that's all you've got, go ahead and use it.
Ideally, Teflon or PTFE.
Yeah, Teflon or PTFE lubes work best. They penetrate really well. They're clean. Particles don't stick to them very easily. All right.
What about starting with WD-40 and then doing chain lube, if you want to repeat the question?
All right. So I just asked, what about starting with WD-40 and then doing chain lube? WD-40 will make a good cleaner. So that will actually get off a lot of the gunk. So that's fine. WD-40 is also great for removing stickers and adhesives of all sorts. So for those purposes, it's great. I just think the WD-40, for most people, it's an unnecessary step because the liquid that your lubricant's suspended in will act as a cleaner. That's why we over-lube to begin with and wipe off the excess.
You have a couple questions.
Sure.
We've got a question here from Dan. Correct seat height for road bikes?
Okay, so that could get really complicated, and we actually offer fitting services here, so we really get into the minutia of it. The rule of thumb, and I'm going to do this really quick because I don't want to, by giving it a lot of attention, give the idea that this can have a quick and easy answer, because it can be complicated. So I'm going to pull this bike down, and I'm going to demonstrate. It doesn't have a pedal, but I've got this dummy pedal, which will suffice. Okay. So generally speaking, these are not my SPD Crocs, but they'll do the job. Generally speaking, with the cranks at the 5 o'clock position, your knee should have about 145 to 150 degree bend. That's cranks at the 5 o'clock position and your foot parallel to the ground. All right. Now that's just a starting point because everyone's built a little bit differently. There are lots of factors. You know, I should also mention that when you do that, make sure that you're over the ball of your foot. So watch what happens to my knee. If I slide my foot forward, my knee angle just increased. If I slide my knee back, my knee angle just decreased. So when you take this measurement, you want to make sure you're over the ball of your foot and that the cranks are about, you guys still hear me? My microphone fell off. I have no idea how long ago it fell off.
Just now.
Okay. So let me make sure this doesn't get tangled again. It's tangled again. You see, there is a reason I am a bicycle mechanic and not a production assistant. Okay. So as I was saying, the 5 o'clock position is where you want to test your seat height. You'll see many people say at the bottom of the pedal stroke, you want to make sure you have, 145, 150 degree bend at your knee. But this is actually the point of greatest distance from seat to the pedal. Whereas this is a little bit shorter. So if you make your measurement here, you may find that your saddle height's a little bit too high when you're in this position. So one final thing about saddle heights, it's very subjective. There's typically a range of about 10 degree angles that works, 145 to 155, 140 to 150 degree bend at the knee, but it's very subjective. And if the seat height is not working well for you as an individually, you may have things like groin numbness, which is fairly common, but you should not endure it because it can be solved. Hamstring discomfort and knee discomfort. Those are all indications that your seat height might be wrong. It may be generally within the proper range, but it's wrong for you as an individual. All right.
Next question.
All right, we've got a question here from Andy. Are there simpler gear shifter alignment checks or fixes you can show? Or is that a topic better covered in another video?
That can get really complicated. Let's just do the basics for people who aren't familiar with it at all. Okay. So generally speaking, on a modern indexing derailleur, so that's a derailleur that clicks into gear, they're actually fairly easy to set up. And if they're not setting up properly, there's usually an issue somewhere along the line. Perhaps there's extra friction in the cable from a worn or rusty cable. You have a kink in your housing, something like that. With a nice new housing and cable, usually these things should work fairly well without too much of adjustment. Generally speaking, can we get a close-up? Let's start. Put your bike upside down or in a stand if you're lucky enough to have one.
You might get better lighting on the other side.
All
I
right.
think it's kind of dark on the side. Just loosen this.
Maybe if we could just
That should be good.
do that. Okay. All right. So put your bike in the smallest cog and see that your top cog is lined up directly beneath it. Directly beneath it, or about 1 millimeter or so inboard. Now, if the cog isn't lined up that way, you've got an adjuster barrel. Now, is the picture good enough where you could see that the chain is angled towards the inside? Okay, so just like on our brakes, we have an adjuster barrel. An adjuster barrel turned clockwise will tighten your cable, which in this case is going to move the derailleur inboard. So I'm going to move this, tighten it, watch that line up. Okay, now we see it's pretty well aligned. The bottom pulley, or I should say the top pulley, is aligned with this small cog here. Let's try shifting. So now we have the opposite problem. I shift to a smaller cog. It's very hesitant. So the cable is too tight. If your chain won't shift from a larger to a smaller cog, that's from a lower to a higher gear, you probably have too much tension on your cable or too much friction on the cable. Friction is something that we're not going to address right now, but tension is fairly easy. Too much tension, turn the adjuster barrel clockwise. Let's go up 1 cog, down 1 cog. So now this is well aligned. Let's make this out of alignment. Okay, so I'm clicking into my faster gear. It's very hesitant. You see it doesn't want to go. Oh, it's not. Let's make it even worse. Hold on, get a better example. Okay, so we've got a few more questions. I'll just do this, illustrate this really quickly one last time. Okay. This is such a good bicycle that I can't make it shift poorly. All right. I really can't make it shift poorly. Okay, I think we've got the general concept. Here, we'll do this last gear. It doesn't want to go into this small gear. That means the cable is too tight. If it doesn't want to go to the smaller cogs, cable's too tight. If it doesn't want to go to the bigger cogs, cable is too loose. This cable's too tight. I'm going to loosen it by turning it clockwise until it shifts into gear. There we go. All right, next one.
All right. The
The next question is, there may be a subject for holder and video, but any advice on a bare bones assortment of essential tools and accessories they'd recommend for a rider to have on board for a typical recreational ride?
Okay, recreational ride. That's actually pretty straightforward. You want to carry tire levers, CO2 cartridge and pump, and preferably a spare inner tube, but patches will work well as also. If you have a flat tire on the side of the road, you're already pretty frustrated, and having to patch a tube is probably the last thing that you want to do. So if you could carry a spare tube with you, you could usually get just about everything in a little seat bag. So patch kit, end or tube, CO2 levers or a little mini pump, tire levers. I said CO2 levers, CO2, tire levers, a mini pump, and a small multi-tool. Do we have a multi-tool we could show? 4, 5, and 6 Allen wrenches. Those are your most common sizes on every bike. So any multi-tool that's got a 4, 5, and 6 Allen wrench. And they have all sorts of really cool multi-tools. I collect them for no good reason, that have things like chain breakers and little places to store a quick link and practically, a little condensed $5,000 toolkit. But ask yourself, do you want to carry that huge bulky thing around when you're really not going to change a chain yourself on the side of the road? If you know how to do that, if you want to learn how to do that, that's great, go ahead and get that. But your cell phone's the best toolkit that you could have. So just keep that in mind. Flat tire is by far the most common repair that you're going to need to do on the side of the road. So make sure you have everything with you for that and that you know how to do it, which if we have time, maybe I'll go over that. Let's go through other questions.
All right. My suspension is making string noise like it is leaking air whenever it flexes. Any tips on how to fix this?
So if it's actually leaking air, it's not going to provide as much compression damping as it has in the past. So it's probably not leaking air. It's probably dirty stanchion tubes or something like that. So that it may be time for suspension service. That's a little bit more complicated than we could get into here. Generally speaking, your shock should not, unlike an inner tube, suspension should not lose air just sitting around for a few months. It should hold its air very well. So if you are leaking air, that is a more serious problem. Most people do not service suspension as frequently as they should. Many manufacturers recommend 25 to 50 hour service, basic suspension service, which is a lot more frequent than most people expect. So that's going to be every 3 to 6 months for a lot of people. And if you're riding your bike a lot and you don't do that service, you can do damage to the stanchion tubes, the sliders that the lowers move up and down on, and that could get really costly. So that is something that you may want to look into doing more frequently. As far as the noises you're hearing, it may have gone a little bit too long already and you've done some damage to the stanchion tubes. It is the type of thing you would need to bring into a bike shop. Next one.
All right.
And I think that was the questions for now. Do we have any other questions for anybody?
All right. What time is it?
12:48.
12:48. You guys interested in seeing how to change a flat tire, since we already discussed that, and that is the most common repair? I'm going to assume that people are interested, or many of you know how to do this already, but for anyone who doesn't, I think it's an important skill to have. So let me go over it. What was that?
Folks said sure, and then another one was how to adjust seat height, maybe.
Sure. So we could probably do both of those really quick. So flat tire. Okay, so we're loosening up our quick release. We discussed quick releases earlier. Actually, this is pretty interesting. Many of your brakes are going to be too tight to get your wheel in and out. Some of them will have quick releases. See this lever here opens up the brakes. Some of them will not, or the quick release is going to be hard to find. Don't worry about that so much. If your tire is deflated, it will slide right out. Okay, so we're giving this wheel a flat. All right, so Got a flat tire. We reach into our handy seat pouch. We pull out our tire levers. Tire levers usually come in sets of 2 or 3. I'll show you why. First thing to do is go around the tire and push the edge of it inwards to disconnect it from the bead of the rim. That's the inner lip of the metal rim. Okay, we're going to start opposite the valve. Take your tire lever. Stephen Colbert did this recently, and he used a spoon or a knife, I think. Try not to do that. That will necessitate a trip to the bike shop, as you have to buy a new tire, at least. Maybe the hospital as well. So you see I'm taking the lip of the tire lever, putting it under the bead of the tire, which is the wire edge of the tire, and prying it down. Now, in many cases, you'll just be able to slide forward and take your tire off. But sometimes it's really tight. This one's kind of tight. So that's why tire levers come in sets. Most of them will have a little hook. Go like that. Then you take your second tire lever and you put it underneath the bead of the tire, somewhere further down the line. And you pry off a little bit more. And it should become easier and easier to slide the tire off. And you notice as I'm sliding the tire off, I'm pushing forward. Try not to push backwards. Not to say that this has ever happened to anyone here, but if you pull backwards, you lose your grip. You may wind up in urgent care, which is not something you want to do nowadays. Okay. So we've got just one side of the tire off. You'll notice I'm leaving the other side of the tire off. No need to take the full tire off. This will save time. We could do that later. So we've got half the tire off. We pull our tube out. Do not leave your tube on the side of the road. You could fold it up, put it in your pocket, wrap it around your shoulders, whatever you need to do to get it home. Okay, so now you're going to pull your new tube out of your bag. And you're going to want to fill it up just a little bit so it holds its shape. So I'm going to grab my compressor here. Just a tiny bit. And now we're going to start with the valve. Oh, I'm doing this terribly. I've left out the most important step, which is to check your tire for what caused the flat to begin with. All right. This was almost really embarrassing. If I would have left that out, yeah, I would have had to ask you to expunge this from the internet. Okay, so very carefully, if you have a gloved hand, that's great, but very carefully, you want to check the inside of the tire for whatever caused the flat to begin with. So you see I'm running my fingers underneath it while looking at the surface to see if a nail or a thorn is in there. Now, you may not want to use your hand, which is perfectly reasonable because that could be dangerous. So look at the inside of the tire from the inside as you're moving around it. The other thing to do is check the sidewalls to see if there is a cut along the sidewall. If there is a cut along the sidewall, your tube will protrude from it and pop. Okay, so we're double checking here. Nothing in there. So we're going to install our tube. Start with your valve. Pull the tire back from the valve hole. Install your tube. Lift the tire over the edge of the tube. And insert the tube deep into the tire and then roll it back into the rim. It's really important that the tube is in the channel of the rim. Otherwise, it will get caught underneath the bead of the tire and cause another flat. And again, the bead of the tire is the wire edge, which actually is quite sharp. So as you see, I'm going through, I'm putting the tube into the tire and then rolling it back into the rim. I'm not actually installing the tire yet, just making sure that the tube is seated into the channel of the rim. Now, starting with the valve, remember to take the tire off, we start opposite of the valve. To put the tire on, we start with the valve. The tube bunches up near the valve, so if you were to finish at the valve, it would be kind of hard to get the tire in place. So you see, I'm just using my fingers. I'm moving in equal opposite directions away from the valve. So when I'm finished, I'll be directly opposite. And then we're getting to the hard part. These last few inches on some tires can be really difficult to get into place. You are going to be very tempted to take your tire lever, put it underneath here, and pry this on. If at all possible, you want to avoid that because your tire lever can puncture your tube. So if you recall, we started with a little bit of air in the tube in order to get it to sit in the channel of the rim. Now we're going to take that air out once we've gotten to the end here. Hopefully that'll make things a little bit easier. And you're going to take the heel of your hand and try to roll this into place. And it can be really difficult, especially with some tight racing bike tires. But if you go slowly and just do a little at a time, it will eventually pop into place. Okay, so last two steps. Inflate your tire partially, just enough so it starts to take its shape, and inspect. Make sure that the tire isn't coming off the rim at any point and that the tube is not protruding from the tire at any point. And then you could finish the job. All right. There we go. Anything else, Brandon?
It shows how to adjust seat height.
All right, so let's do.
I brought it back with the actual clamp over here and the orange one.
Okay, so let's do seat height. I'm going to go to this bicycle over here. So we had a question about seat height in terms of knee angle, and I did a very general overview of that. Many bikes will have a quick release on their seat. Can you see here? Just open a lever, just like the quick release on your wheels, you just open a lever, seat moves up and down. Now one way to look at this is, as I said, you put the pedal about 5 o'clock. If you could put your heel on the seat and your legs entirely extended, your knee is locked out, some people say that's going to give you the perfect seat height. It'll get you close. I'm going to explain to you why it won't be perfect. So you see I'm using the quick release. Sometimes it's a 5mm Allen wrench or a 4mm Allen wrench. I adjusted that again. Now I'm on the seat. My leg's almost locked out with my heel on the pedal. That's a good place to start. That suggests that when you're here, you're going to be about 145-degree knee angle. But it doesn't work for everybody. If you'll notice, so here, my knee's perfectly straight. But when I put my forefoot on it, it's really pretty dramatically bent. So that's because I have a really large foot. You know, your foot is part of the lever arm, it's part of your leg. So that really only works for if you've got a medium-sized foot. If you've got a really small or really large foot, this rule of thumb doesn't work so well for you. So just make sure that when your forefoot is on the pedal, you've got a slight bend in your knee. You know, we typically say about 145 degrees, and that's a good place to start, and you just see how it feels from there. All right. Anything else?
Right at one. We haven't had any other questions really.
All right. Well, I think that's it. It's very basic stuff, of course. I hope it was helpful for some of you. Maybe we could do something like this with focusing on one topic in a little bit more detail at some other point. But that's great. Thank you all for coming. Please be safe out there. The bike shops are here if you really need us. but there's a lot of stuff you could do on your own. Send us an email, and maybe we could give you some advice or guidance. So, thanks so much. Wave goodbye, Brandon.